in London School of Economics, and probably first time in his life he felt settled down. And at the same time, I want to say that so being an example himself as a fantastic academic achiever, many intellectual allies of David was coming from non-academia environment. And one of David's dream was to create some kind of non-institutional institute, which allow people from outside of academia get support and contribute and allow to be contributors to the intellectual discussion. And I would like some people who may be not here is like Steve King, Michael Hudson, and I would like especially to name Mehdi Ben Hassim, whom David considered to be the most important living philosopher. And David and Mehdi, with the participation of another beloved student of David, Asya Turkia Zuberman, had just finished a book of dialogues that will be published in 3 languages soon. And another student and interlocutor of David was very important for him was Christophe Petit, who was responsible for David's reception in France, a country where we were sometimes joking that we are going to move when we get really old. And of course, like all the students from London School of Economics was David's family, and especially Elif and also Julio and Gabi and Anna Celine and all the others are probably they're here. And the last thing I would like to do, I would like is to announce a funeral arrangement for David. So a public ceremony to celebrate David Graeber's life and mourn his death will take place in New York and around the world on 11th of October. It is organized by David's friends from Occupy, activists and artists, and we will announce these events tomorrow on the day of the Occupy anniversary. It will be announced on his website, davidgraeber.industry. The link is from Wikipedia article of David too. Please join us all. We did try to make it in a way that everybody from all around the world will participate, will be able to participate, and we spend lots of time trying to facilitate it, so it will be totally open. In the last things, the disposal of David's remains will be carried out by the 3 women who he loved over the course of his life, Nu Lee, Lauren Leaf, and Nika Dubrovsky, and who remained close to him even at the time of his death. This will be strictly private event. Please respect our grief.
We'll now hear from Ayça Çubukçu.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know what to say really, so I wrote something for David. Today, it's been exactly 2 weeks since you're gone, having left us suddenly in Venice. Where did you go, dear David? Perhaps about death too, you knew well. After all, you had a theory of everything. We first met in New York. The Twin Towers were soon to fall. I collected pamphlets of our making. We said no to war. Muslims are not the enemy. You led nightly meetings with hundreds from many walks of life, shining naturally in moments of despair and periods of bliss alike. Larger than life, is that not what they say about people like you? But there was no one like you, dear David. You were not from this century. You loved borrowing dress from other periods of time. Is it the past or the future which you came from? I was 21, you were 40 when we met 19 revolutions ago. You, an anthropologist at Yale, me, an editorial assistant at a Marxist press. We met as anarchists of the Direct Action Network in New York City. You were a founder, and I and you were a rival. Soon after, we spent every night at the Charas Community Center arguing about which anti-war action to take. We organized demonstrations at Union Square. Some 10,000 people marched with us towards Times Square. I remember September 11, 2001. I'm on Brooklyn Bridge going to work when I see a plane crash into a skyscraper. The government and media speculate the crash may be the doing of anarchists. True then, we think, our movement is strong. I reach you perhaps the next day. We have a meeting in the Lower East Side. Muslim men and women are beaten and rounded up left and right. We make anti-racist, anti-war pamphlets, distribute them in groups across many neighborhoods. 5 years later, after the occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq, you and I teach a seminar at the Brecht Forum in West Village. We call it Change the World Without Taking Power, after a book by John Holloway. Years later, you published Direct Action, an ethnography, in which you thank, by our names, many an activist peopling each and every page. I take that to be an act of generosity. You, David, internationalist, anarchist, you gave anthropology a good name. Commemorations have begun, and I cannot but imagine what you would have done. Disciplined and festive you were when paying tribute, playing games, generous with your time, and very gentle with your care. I talk with friends about you. We enjoy making you alive. You will be missed, but not absent. Once here, then there, like the magic you dared. Let this be a promise. We will remember your mischievous soul dancing to its own beat while listening to us all. We will miss you sorely, dear friend, comrade, colleague, revolutionary thinker, David Graeber, presente. Thank you.
We'll now hear from Maurice Bloch.
Thank you very much for this. David, I've known for almost 30 years. He went in so many directions, but there was always one which dominated everything, and that was the attempt to break out of the confines of the received narratives about Madagascar, about anthropology, breaking out of so many things. He went in many directions, but always outwards. And because he was so brilliant, he was always bringing light against pretense and fog. Breaking out means many things, though it does not mean necessarily knowing where you're going. This was true of David. He was often disappointed by people around him, but then he just left them by the side. In Madagascar, he finally landed in a really extraordinarily complex place, and he immediately joined forces with two other breakers out. A Marxist woman who had deeply analyzed the situation, and in terms she learned, though this was always a struggle, an ambitious leader moving towards a new setup, but who was in the end defeated by the reassertion of his slave ancestry from powerful outsiders with their expensive cars and tombs. In Chicago, he was he was imaginatively breaking out too of the point of view of his leaders, of his teachers. He had no heroes at all, except perhaps for the imagined image of an absent father fighting and being betrayed in the Spanish Civil War. He was never at ease. He wanted to break out of all constraining structures, but was actually caught in them. He was surrounded by many, but always alone. He was never comfortable anywhere, but wanting to go to a free outside, which must be out there. He broke constraining doors all around him, but he never entered the freedom he sought. He was searching, worrying, working, doubting, breaking, creating, always. I'm reminded of the fateful phrase that sent Thomas à Becket to his death. Who will rid us of this turbulent priest? Many wanted to say this, but many also loved him, and so do I. Thank you.
We'll now turn to Renata Todd.
You need to give me a second because I thought it was going to be Elif actually.
We can hear from Elif.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to thank everyone for organizing this commemoration. It's been exactly 2 weeks since the tragic loss of David, and I just wanted to say a few remarks on especially, you know, when I first met him and what he meant, especially to us as Kurdish activists and people who were a part of the Kurdish movement that he was so fascinated and inspired by, and also in return inspired himself. I first met David in 2014 at a demonstration during the resistance of the city of Kobane, and it was towards the end of 2014. He had already been to Rojava once by the time I met him, and then the next time we properly met was early 2015 at the Hamburg conference that is put on predominantly by the International Initiative for the Freedom for Öcalan. And by then he had already written the preface for the English translation of volume 1 of the Manifesto for a Democratic Civilization by Abdullah Öcalan, this book that Öcalan wrote in solitary confinement in a Turkish prison. And then I was inspired, actually, David Graeber then convinced me to study social anthropology, and that's how my love for anthropology started. I think he did that for many people, and I will be ever grateful for his, for his introduction to, I think that this discipline that actually has so much potential. And it's been quite difficult to see the way David has been eulogized over the last 2 weeks. Now, none of the way he has been eulogized has been untrue. All of them have been true and beautiful and heartfelt, but it just feels incomplete for someone who I believe so deeply, and I'm sure many people agree, that should be here. Someone who loved life so much should be alive. So I think, a lot of people have spoken about his intellectual genius and his contribution in many ways, his connection to social movements, but is also his involvement as a member of social movements in general. And I think we talk a lot about, as activists who also have a connection to whether it's academia or intellectual thought in general, the importance of bringing theory and practice together. And David took that to another level by bringing theory, practice, play, and curiosity all together. And he believed that all of these must be intertwined and none of them can be separated from each other. And this is where also his love for social movements and transformation and his curiosity in human life and human capabilities and possibilities came from. And so when we say that it's a beautiful thing when academics have connection to social movements, David also, it didn't stay for him there. He had a connection to social movements, but also to people and to life in general. He never felt like he could ever be separated from life. And therefore I believe, you know, I always grew up a curious child, but I think David Graeber, and I think he did this to many of us, he made curiosity permanent for me, curiosity for our surroundings, for human life, knowledge, for information, but also for possibilities and capabilities, also through understanding history. You know, I'm sure many people who are close to him would have these experiences where you'd be talking about having a quite mundane conversation, and all of a sudden, you don't know how it's happened, but he's brought in Mesopotamian mythology into a very mundane conversation. And I remember just before the day we were traveling to Venice together for this holiday, I said, David, have you got mosquito spray? And then he you know, then we started texting about bugs, and all of a sudden, all I knew from mosquito spray, he was telling me about an Indian myth about mosquitoes and why you know, this Indian myth believes mosquitoes still exist because apparently they defended humans of some sort. You know, it was this really hilarious myth that he told me about, you know, based on mosquito spray. So I think someone once said to me, and I really believe this, that he really didn't pretend to think. You know, that we live in this world of thinkers and, like, you know, of people who believe that, you know, that's their role to, like, put thought out there and, like, you know, not be connected to life. He never pretended that, and I think this is very evident in the way he wrote. You know, many of us admire this. And at one point I said, David, how do you write in this way? You know, when I'm reading your work, it feels like I'm having a conversation with you. It feels so accessible, even these incredibly complex ideas. And he said, I do a double translation. I translate my thoughts into writing, but I make sure I do a second translation to make sure it's accessible to people. And I think this, you know, when we talk about his generosity, I think this demonstrates it in one of the most beautiful ways, because he was generous in every way. With his friends, he was generous with his time, with his name, with his thought, but also with what he put out there in so many different ways. And that's why he has all these, you know, flamboyant articles about, you know, whether it's like, you know, bullying, or his infamous article called Dickheads. And that's because for him it was about having fun with it. And this is what he would always tell me about anthropology. He would say, I chose anthropology because you can fit anything into anthropology. You can write about anything and somehow it can be anthropological. And, you know, sometimes he would write pieces either write paragraphs for either a new article or a book, and he would show you in this mischievous way, and he would say, look at this paragraph I wrote, because he's either being really funny or he's being provocative, but he's just having fun with it nevertheless. It was never this, like, daunting thing. And I think, you know, all of this understanding he brought, and all of this generosity, this contribution, him as a whole person, none of these separate, you know, they came together in this beautiful harmony, his different characteristics, I think. And this, in its entirety, he brought in his contribution to the Kurdish struggle and to Kurdish solidarity, when no one was talking about the fight in especially northern Syria, the transformation of society in northern Syria, the democratic, ecological, and women's liberationist revolution. David was screaming from the hills about this incredible revolution that was happening, and at a time when it was one of the most dangerous places on earth, he did not hesitate for a second. And I remember that one of the times we were there together, he was like a child, you know, it's just, he's like, this is revolution. And there was not a second where his excitement for what he believed in, which was almost inherent, it was like common sense, and it was almost inherent, he didn't deter from it. You know, it was that childlike excitement for the beauty and the capabilities of human society when it's allowed, that didn't ever go away, however many times he saw it. So, you know, we're at a time where a lot of people were saying, you know, Kurds have no friends but the mountains, a phrase that I have an issue with. He absolutely crashed that statement and said, no, we can all do this together, and we will do this together. And he did this consistently through his strategizing, through his understanding, through making the connections between, you know, systematic realities in how, you know, oppressed people exist in this way, but also in the way he just brought all of it. So I just want to say, you know, David was a friend, a comrade, a mentor. He was a source of creative inspiration, but also what we call in Kurdish a heval, which means a direct translation is friend, but it means much more than that. So yeah, I mean, we love you, David, and we will definitely never forget you.
And we'll now hear from Renata Todd.
Thank you, Laura, and good afternoon, everybody. I've been invited to say a few words about David as we shared a close working relationship. I met him back sometime in 2013. We'd kind of joined the department around about the same time. And initially, I'm not going to lie, I felt a little bit intimidated by him until I got to know him better. And then I realized that he was just the sweetest soul with the kindest heart. There are many things I miss about him already, not least the laugh out loud moments he delivered frequently unintentionally. Like the excuses he'd give me for missing meetings or being late to his office hours. You know, he'd come up with stuff like, oh, but I was eating lunch, or sorry, I was buying groceries at Whole Foods. He was just notoriously bad at timekeeping and diary management. And most of my phone calls to him would always start with, oh my God, David, where are you? Hurry, you're late. He'd always tell me that he was 5 minutes away, which was David speak for, I'm just leaving home now. And we'd often joke about the day he'd become fabulously wealthy on the back of his book sales. And then he could finally afford my services as a PA. And then sometime last year, David rocks up to the office. He's got this extra spring in his step. He confides that he's met somebody wonderful and that he's in love. And then a short while later, the news that he's soon to be married. And you know, despite his vast circle of friends and acquaintances, on a basic human level, he wanted the same as all of us. Someone to love and someone who'd love him back. And I'm glad he found that with Nika, because she made him so very, very happy. And it brings me comfort to know that when he left this world, he was surrounded by her love. I miss you, David.
We'll now hear from Alpa Shah.
Thanks, thanks Renata, thanks Laura, thanks everybody for coming here today. This is a personal story, but it's about David, the vampire slayer, the trickster, and the pirate. I met David when he joined Goldsmiths in 2007. Yale's loss was our gain, but our lives became intertwined after I returned from 1.5 years of field research in the forests of Eastern India, amongst the Adivasi communities swept up in the spread of a Marx, Lenin and Mao inspired Naxalite insurgency and a brutal counterinsurgency. I was drowning in a sea of darkness. Slowly and gently, without knowing it, David gave me hope. He helped me breathe again. For years, we talked every day. We wandered the streets of London, discovering the best angry lamb, soft-shell crab, ceviche, laughing and dreaming of other worlds. When I moved from Goldsmiths to the LSE in 2013, I told him he must come with me. I needed him across the river and across the corridor, but I also thought he needed me. By then, I had discovered both David's genius, but also his extreme vulnerability. He wanted to live the world of everyday communism. He imagined he could immerse us all, yet he was confined by the structures of life around us. As Renata has said, many today will have experienced both the meetings that David never turned up for, but also those where his interventions were invaluable, will have been in lectures he was late for, where he veered totally off track, but also saw the brilliance of what he said and followed him into the corridors and the street. We'll know the chapters that he never read, but also the magic of his engagement. We fought once. I called him a bully. He called me one back. Then we fought over what the word means. I really actually can't remember why. I think it was probably some department meeting he hadn't turned up to. I decided to put aside such earthly matters. Our relationship had never been based on that. David's driving purpose in life was to stop the vampires, the forces of inequality, from entirely engulfing the earth by keeping alive the dream of greater emancipation. When he described the lead character of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this is the TV cult sensation that he loved, as a reluctant hero chosen by mysterious powers to lead humanity's war against vampires, he was putting into words how he saw himself. At least that's what I think. But life on Earth presented contradictions. He deeply wanted the validation of the academy, but he hated its elitism, its bureaucracy, and its racism. He longed to be married, but he also wanted us to live together in a big house full of curios and children that we'd all raise together. He loved talking about himself, but he always wanted to put others first. He wrote furiously as though there was no tomorrow, but he lived like we had eternity. For years, David wanted us to write together. I loved the beauty of his utopias, the possibilities they offered, but felt doubtful about how the majority of the world's population could get there, laboring in the brick kilns or construction sites of factories of India, Kenya, or Mexico. From my time with the Naxalites, I was very aware of the dystopia that is embedded in utopia. I told David I wasn't quite ready, that I needed more time. Don't worry, he said, we have our lives ahead together. But he committed me anyway on Twitter and to editors, I now find out. I shouldn't be surprised. David was always having a lot of fun as a trickster, playfully disrupting systems to create better ones. After the publication of Debt, David became a global figure, earned recognition within and beyond the academy. If David revolutionized the idea of pirates as rebels and abducted folk who mutinied against their captains to create truly democratic communities on board their ships, declaring a war on all of the world, his own pirate fleet was growing. He was loved far and wide. But at the same time, David remained in a way lonely, a loneliness that was inevitable from the tensions between trying to create another world while having to inhabit this one. As the good and the great amongst the anthropologists here have taught us, death can be more powerful than life. It can regenerate life itself. David died at a moment when he and his ideas can be supremely potent, can transcend us all. Rest in peace, David. You will live through us, giving birth to more vampire slayers, tricksters, and pirates.
We now have some time to reflect on what we've heard and to collect our own thoughts on David. And while we do that, we're going to play again the song that led us into Across the Threshold into this time together. This is a Malagasy song, and Rita's going to put the words of the song up on the screen so that you can see them. They really convey some really important and beautiful emotions, I think. And as you're reflecting and thinking, please do also start to put up your hands for the open mic.
Rilani tamanga mangu sarumantu nirauna funinani ulumasineye aizam timbawani riana Rilani tamanga mangu saromanto ny raona fonenany olo masine aizany tsy mba hoany ry anina ny adiady natao fahiny samba tao itsony hoa rafikazonanitsane ny sisanampanirina ry anina ny adiady natao fahiny azamba tao itsony hoa rafikazonanitsane ny sisanampanirina ry anina na izao na ianao mandalo fampivahiny tsy misy omineto kaoka maiva mela ry anina na izao na ianao mandalo fampivahiny tsy misy onineto kaoka mba hifamela ry anina raha sendraka velontsento ny laozany avaty anao tombondalana reny azy isika za mbola hoany ry anona rasendraka velontsento ny laozany avatyana tombondalana reny azy isika za mbola hoany ry anona ilanitra mangamanga saromanto ny raona fonenany olo masine aizany sy mba hoany ry anina
Thank you, everyone. I now have this funny light coming through, which is somewhat appropriate. Thank you, everyone. I just want to say a few words and remind you how this is going to work. So anyone who wants to join and share their thoughts and memories of David, if you can put up your virtual hand, which you find in the participants logo, please start doing so now, and then I will randomly call upon people. Let me remind you, you just have 2-3 minutes, no more than that. And I will unmute you when I call upon you, and you will receive a little message saying, do you agree to be unmuted? And you just need to click that on your screen. As Laura said earlier, if you go on and on, I might have to jump in and interrupt you, but I'm sure I won't need to do that. So I'm actually going to start by calling on Annalise, and I'm going to unmute you now. And if you can explain who you are and what your connection is to David, and then share your memories with us.
Thank you, Rita, and hello, everyone. I was one of David's PhD students, and I'd like to deliver a message from the rest of his PhD students and also some previous students. So here we are. We're going to miss how generous David was with his time, how he never made us feel rushed whenever we went to see him. We're going to miss how generous he was with his thoughts, sharing anecdotes and stories about people he met and things he read, and how he broke with the cold formalities that sometimes shape student-mentor relationships by inviting us into his life and its details. We're going to miss the playfulness and the way that he mocked the structures of British academia, how he insisted on anthropology as a discipline that could really give us the tools to transform the world, and how he believed in his students and encouraged us to pursue a future in that same discipline. We're going to miss receiving emails from him sent by NSA Data Collation Center and being dazzled by his wit over drinks at the pub. His writings and ideas on value, labor, and the contemporary state of work and capitalism helped us move beyond theoretical dead ends, pushing us to approach matters creatively and differently, teaching us to ask better questions, giving us hope, skillfully and eloquently critiquing and questioning cynicism. We will miss David's voice, his fast-paced speaking and sometimes mumbling, and the unique perspective he brought into every imaginable topic. We will miss David's wisdom. At a time of dark futures, his theoretical brilliance and his kind and generous soul are much needed. We will miss David's laugh, his humor, and his determination to have fun along the way. As he once said, play is the ultimate expression of freedom for its own sake. We can only hope to face the future with his upbeat spirit. David always encouraged us to rethink anthropological tradition, challenging us to follow our instincts and to find our voices, often against the grain. David's commitment to anthropology was for its unique ability to help us think otherwise, to imagine more democratic, caring, and freer societies, which he believed existed already. It's all a matter of doing things differently, he once explained. In everything he wrote, in his activism, and in his daily practice of everyday communism, he has given us explicit advice for turning his teachings into real, concrete, direct actions. May we do justice to his memory. Thank you.
Thank you, Annelise. And I can testify to the laughter that used to come through the wall of the office that I share with David. And it would just come to life when someone, whether it was a student, a journalist, an activist, whoever would come through, his very recognizable kind of laughter would just expand. And I was thinking yesterday about the plants that he wanted when he first settled in the office, and I will make sure that I take care of them. Thank you very much for sharing your memories and your experience of David. I'm now going to call on, I think I'm going to call on TJ Gabor. I don't know what your full name is. If you can introduce yourself, please.
Hello, yes, I'm TJ Gabor, Taisir John Gabor. For some reason, everyone calls me the guy who made his website, but I mean, just basically, I tried to amplify him and have his back because he had many enemies. His enemies were legion. I was in bullshit jobs and started working on the goofiest projects that, like with him, that had the tiniest chance of succeeding, but they were very fun. I'd better be fast because I think I have things that you might want to hear. About David the anthropologist, I heard about an old unpublished paper of David's by sheer luck and asked him for it. It revolutionized my life. We talked about publishing it since like a year ago, and he wanted to just finish one part that was undone. And I plan to publish it on his website. You might enjoy it. It talks about how limited and fleeting consciousness is and offers a nifty little hack to avoid this limit. And I'm not going to spoil it for you. It also discusses spirituality, about how you can have everyday mystical experiences without having to, quote, sit on a mountain and beat yourself with thorns for 20 years. Morris Bloch spoke. He should know that this paper starts by saying, quote, one of the things I most admire about Morris Bloch, and I'll let him read the paper to find out what that one of many things was. About David the activist now, here's 3 quick lessons I learned from working with him on some projects. First, with David, there was always enough freedom that you could make activism fun, imaginative, and even indulge your darker sides constructively in a good way. Second, for some reason, people think logic just coldly eliminates possibilities, but he knew logic could explode possibilities. You could find all sorts of ways to solve a problem in just a small space. So logic, emotion, and imagination can amplify each other. And finally, David was all about his relationships. perhaps we could perform a little social surgery and team up with each other. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you very much. Can I call on Asha now, or Asya? I apologize in advance. I'm a bit shaking and my pronunciation is probably not the best. So there you go. You're unmuted now.
Thank you. I'm Asya. I was studying anthropology at undergraduate level at LSE when I met David. He was a teacher in first and third year, and then we became friends. And through opportunities that were unlocked by his generosity, we started working on a book of dialogues that I'm so grateful to have, and feel so wealthy to still be in conversation with him as I'm finishing editing the translation of it. I just, from everything that's been said, I just want to really thank David for giving me faith that there's no dead ends ever. No dead ends and no, just always another way that I just can't see and need him to point out. And so I'm really, really grateful to be able to share that dialogue with you all soon. And I send my love to Nika and everyone else.
Thank you, Asya. Sorry, of course I know you very well. Apologies for not recognizing him. And thank you for sharing that. Nutan, can we hear from you, please?
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you, not terribly well. Try again.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm from India. I studied anthropology in India, like a very traditional subject. Actually, when I came across his readings, I have never met him. I dreamed of meeting him one day. Now I more believe in the song you shared with us. So one day I'll get that opportunity, certainly. But the thing is that he gave me that idea that any discipline, if you, like every discipline has that, I can say that power to change the world, and especially anthropology in Indian context, when we study it in India, we see it very, with a very different outlook. We have an idea that is a colonialist subject which we are studying, but he gave that, he revolutionized all my thinking about that. And he helped me to understand that anthropology is all about bringing change in the society. That's why I'm indebted to him for that. And I just hope that I would be able to contribute in the line where he has been working so far when he was there with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So can I call on Julio Linares, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't really know what to say. I didn't prepare much. I last saw David the Sunday before his passing here in Berlin, where I live. I was one of his students 2-3 years ago, and ever since I met him, he always supported me and believed in me in my work, and that gave me strength to believe that other worlds were possible. Whether if it's connecting the struggles from the south, from Kurdistan all the way to Guatemala, where I'm from, to things like basic income. He encompassed everything and somehow allowed, not just me, but all of his students to really look for those corners of the imagination and bring the light out. The last thing I was working on with David was his project called Spectre, which maybe some of you might have heard about, which was supposed to be a secret political economic consortium, and I won't tell you what the rest means. And yeah, I feel quite lost at the moment, and yeah, if anybody wants to talk and figure out how to build things together in a collective way, in a consensus way, that would be really nice. Yeah, I just one last word is that when I was at the LSE, David tried to support me for 2 years to go into PhD, but unfortunately, he called it a mysterious committee. They never allowed my funding to come through, but nevertheless, he was always there, and he was always very generous. And yeah, I'm forever grateful for David for revolutionizing the world, my life, and the lives of many people to come. Yeah.
Thank you, Julio. In the chat, someone is asking the website, Men, if you can give us the details of the paper that starts with what I really admire about Morris Bloch is. So perhaps if you can put it in the chat, then at a later stage, I can share that paper with people who are interested in it. So I'm going to call on Paul. There is someone who has a number as a name. Can you please change or put in the chat what your name is so I can call upon you properly? So Paul, I'll unmute you now.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to pass on my condolences first of all to Nika. I actually contributed to Dave Graeber's book, Bullshit Jobs. I had read his 2 previous books before that and was wondering at the time when he was doing research on that book what he was up to. So I went onto his Twitter account and saw that he was looking for people in bullshit jobs, which I was aware that I had one. I had a small email correspondence with him, which resulted in him using one of the extracts for his book as an example of artists or creatives who work in bullshit jobs and how this, you know, doesn't enable them to be creative, and he used an extract from that. What I found out later on, though, on reviewing the extract that he took was that he had also read a book that I recommended him to read, which was in the footnotes. I've asked many of my friends to read some of his own books, and the fact that he took time to read a book from you know, on the advice of a complete stranger and cited it in his own book was just amazing. On top of that, I distributed his book on bullshit jobs throughout my work in work, and I think at some point I almost spoke to my manager about the idea of bullshit jobs at one point. So his work has influenced me in both you know, creatively and also looking at ideas that maybe in academia they might be frowned upon, but they're very accessible. Yeah, and certainly in my own artistic practice, I've looked into such subjects as well and focused on that. So just really to send my condolences again to everyone who knew more than I did. I just had a brief email interaction with him, but he was a very personable person and had a big impact even in such a short encounter. So thank you very much.
Thank you. What you said also reminded me of a comment I heard the other day from the departmental manager of the geography department at the LSE, who said an undergraduate from his department had written an email to David asking, what is anarchism? And David wrote like 3-page long, you know, kind of multi-paragraph email to a, you know, unknown undergraduate, and the story still goes around the department. So yeah, he was like that. Okay. Can I call on Mike, please?
Hi. I first met David when he and I were 2 very few LSE staff members who were supporting a student occupation in the Vera Anstey room at LSE. Which is a different way of meeting him to many of you, the people here. I feel very privileged to be joining this family of anthropologists today. Ever after, when I went into the dining room at lunchtime and I found David there, I knew it was going to be a good day, because I would have a great companion for half an hour or an hour. I learned today that this was often at the cost of him being late for another meeting. I'm sorry about that. But David was this wonderful mixture of someone who would throw off ideas in 100 different directions in a very short space of time, and then focus so intensely on the one that worked to drive it in directions and to depths that none of the rest of us could have reached. I want to note David as a Jew. I want to speak on behalf of Jewish Voice for Labour. Obviously, David was not a member of JVL. He did not have much time for the Labour Party, but he was immensely supportive of our work, of our right to speak out as Jews who did not toe an orthodox line, and to take personal risk with his reputation to defend this group of embattled Jews. He was many things. He was a mensch.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Can I call on Insa, please?
Thank you, Rita. I'd just like to share my last memory of David, really. So I saw David maybe a month ago. It was in Berlin at a flea market called Mauerpark. And we hadn't arranged to see each other. So I was at the flea market walking around, and suddenly I saw him on one of the stores, and I sort of cried out, David, David, hello. And he just looked at me and he just went like this, oh, hello. And I said to him, David, I've had a newborn baby, look at my baby. And I presented to him my newborn child. And he just said, oh yeah, I've heard you had one of those. And I just want to share this because to me, this really represented who David was, you know, his, and I used to find it offensive when I didn't know him. I used to think, why doesn't he show any surprise? Why doesn't he greet people when I walk into the room and he sees all the people who love him, who like him, and he pretends not to have seen, or he shies away. And now that he's dead and you have time to think, you know, and I've come to think about it very differently. And I think actually he didn't need to show surprise, because for him, life was a surprise, right? Like for him to see me at the flea market was just as much of a surprise as for him to see, I don't know, an old book, a frame, a picture that he picked up on one of the stores at the market. And in a way, I think that was his true democratic spirit, you know, the way he related to the world in an equalizing way, where everything, every encounter, every conversation, every person, everything had an equal value for him. And I think that's what I'd like to remember about David. Thank you.
Thank you, Insa. Can I ask Ian Williams, please? I'll unmute you.
Hey, everybody. My name's Ian. I am a social worker in New York City. I knew David through the Occupy Wall Street movement, and please let me know if you're having any audio issues. But I only met him a handful of times in about 2012 to 2014. I remember the first time I met him was at a discussion in McNally Jackson bookstore, probably about February 2012. And at the time, I was a huge fan of David's work. I had read a lot of his writings, and I was very inspired by, you know, his role in helping shape and kind of popularize the Occupy Wall Street movement, and I think also popularize anarchist ideas. And some of his critiques of like the theoretical dead ends at the time, like I think there was a line in an article he wrote basically talking about the sort of greatest hits of French theory that a lot of the academia was stuck in. I really fondly remember that. But I remember meeting David and feeling very excited, like a fan, and I had a similar kind of nonchalant interaction, you know, where David was just sort of doing his thing, and it was really fun to engage with him. And I remember in an email exchange later, he was more attentive to the process of discussion on the panel and how he was frustrated with the facilitator than any sort of excitement from overly eager fans such as myself. But the last interaction I really had with David, I ended up helping him move out of his childhood home in Chelsea. He was being evicted and had to give up the apartment, and he was giving away his possessions to to friends and people in the movement. And I have a bunch of objects and furniture and some other things that they have a lot of meaning, and I think they'll continue to carry meaning and inspiration. And I feel very grateful for having known him and for having him exist in the world and all the people who have touched him and you've touched. I just wanted to share that. And Nika, my heart goes out to you as well.
Thank you. I would like now to call on Andrew Smart, please. I'm unmuting you now.
Okay. Hi, I'm Andrew Smart. I first met David in Lund, Sweden, when his book, Toward an Anthropological Theory of Value, came out. He gave a small seminar to our anthropology thing, and then we hung out afterwards and got drunk together and talked about 19th century anarchists and making a movie about Bakunin. And he was, back then, even just a very generous, funny, inspiring person, and already obviously so brilliant. And I remember all the professors who were quite committed Marxists challenging him on anarchism, and he always responded with such depth and like it was common sense. And we kept in touch over the years, on and off. And I was in London at the Idler bookstore, and we had some connections with Tom Hodgkinson at the Idler there. And then the last time I saw David, we went out to dinner, I think in 2015, maybe, in London. And he just had so many incredible stories about the neighborhood, about the Spanish Republican exiles there, and Aleister Crowley getting in brawls with people. He knew so much about the history of the neighborhood and the area that he lived in. It was really amazing to know him just a little bit that I did, and he was such an inspiration to all of us who are involved in various movements. And as a thinker, as a philosopher, as an anthropologist, he's just left such a huge wake. And I always loved how he could really tie economists in knots over the kind of flimsy foundations of that discipline. And I loved watching him make people squirm. And when he would just point out that most of the things they believe are just not true. So I'm very sad, and my heart goes out to Nika as well. And so thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So we have Justin Clark. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hello, I'd just like to share a short poem that I wrote inspired by David's first article about bullshit jobs. So when you say I've got potential, what is it that you mean? Potential to grind away, sit around a fucking office all day and do things that help nobody and don't really need doing anyway? As an aspiring comedy writer with a bullshit job, I've found David to be a great source of inspiration in recent years, even meeting him once by inviting myself along to a conference in Birmingham, as well as conversing with him ad hoc via Twitter DMs every now and then. When I met him, I got the impression that he was just as interested to hear the thoughts of others as in sharing his own, and would also often draw on what others were saying in the room in a magical kind of synergy. So David could see the potential and the genius within all of us. They were undoubtedly better for the ideas and critiques that he was able to share in his time with us. I hope they live on and inspire many more. With the neoliberal late-stage capitalist world imploding, I can't help but feel an immense sense of loss and apprehension that we must face whatever comes next without David's unique and deeply valuable insight to make sense of it all. We must learn from his optimism if we are to go forwards. It's up to us to try and make the world differently now, going forwards, and continue to ask the big questions that need to be asked. We must remember that the world is what we make it through our ongoing actions and choices, and it is not static. Thank you, David Graeber.
Thank you, Justin. Andrea, I'm going to call on you now. I'm going to unmute you, please.
Hello. I'd just like to echo what Renata said as one of the former admin people in the office. We had to have, it was difficult to make David do things he didn't want to do. Let's face it. Renata and I always had to kind of play the good cop, bad cop routine. One of us had to be the one that's always there with the deadlines, the other one a bit more kind of nice, trying to coax him into compliance, if you will. And I will forever be grateful that he acknowledged us in his in bullshit jobs as the admin people. It's one of my not very many claims to fame. And yes, I do think we inspired him somewhat, and that is I'm also very proud of. And also, it's so nice to see the kind of Anthro family. A lot of you I haven't seen for a long time, so it's a very sad occasion. Unfortunately, I never got to meet Nika, but I do know that David was very, very happy that you guys found each other. So nice to see you all, however sad it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much. Mark Campbell, please. I'm unmuting you now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. I would just like really to say a few words on behalf of the local people in Portobello, where David and Nika lived. I had a stall just 200 meters from David's house for the last 5-6 years. And it was a great honor for me that almost every week David would come out of his house when he wanted a break from his writing. He would go and get some lunch, and then he would come and he would talk to us on the stalls. I'm a pro-Kurdish rights activist as well, and David would come and we would chat about the latest developments in Rojava, in Kurdistan, and then he would eat his lunch. And I never forget, he would sort of stand over the stall and he would be talking about, and sometimes, and his food would fall onto my stall, but I couldn't say anything to him. And it was, you know, it was, he was just such a lovely soul and such a beautiful human being. I mean, I didn't know much about all his academic work and everything, but he was just such a giving, loving, warm, tender person. Who just wanted to please everybody. And he would always ask, oh, is there anything I can do about the Kurdish issue? And I would rack my brains to think of more things that he could do. And in the end, I felt guilty actually about asking him to do so many things. And we'll really, really miss him. Magdalene and Neil, the bookstall owners at Portobello Market, he had such a warm relationship with them as well. And he would go there every week and look through the books and talk to Magdalene, especially, and Neil. And he was just such a beautiful, accessible, warm, loving, warm-hearted person. And we'll really, really miss him at Portobello Market. Rest in power, David Graeber. And lots of love to Nika, to Aija, to Elif, and to all his close comrades and friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. We have bits of his life in his office at the LSE. I'm going to call on our last contributor, I think, and then I suggest we've gone out a bit over time, but I think, you know, obviously feel free to leave if you need to, but I think I'm just going to call on Gary. And then I'm going to put on some more Malagasy music, and then I'll just ask you to leave. Unfortunately, we have learned, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, that unexpectedly Zoom put a limit of 300 participants. So our 600 plus people who had signed up, half of them were not able to join us, which I don't know, I feel terrible because I was told that we had a 1,000 cap. In any case, we have recorded this, so we'll try and make it available to those who weren't able to join us. But anyway, Gary, I'm muting you now.
Hello, my name is Gary Rowland. I'm a Heyoka, a follower of Elogwa, and a trickster. And I want to first express my condolences to Nika, to everyone on this call who was touched by David's generosity. We've all lost a dear friend. My first memory of David is underneath the Krishna tree during the organizing for Occupy Wall Street. I chose to argue with him and debate with him. He was debating that we shouldn't have police liaisons, and me, having just conducted an occupation in downtown New York, thought that it might go a little bit better if we could talk to the NYPD. I'm happy to say that he won, and because he won that debate, that movement flourished. I also met a memory of David that I wanted to share was when after the occupations, a lot of us had spread out, and he was in Austin, and I received a call from a reporter at Bloomberg News who was writing the article that would eventually become the anti-leader of Occupy Wall Street, David Graeber. And he was, I remember talking to other people in our group after that and being like, what's David doing? And then being like, you need to trust David. David, as it's been relayed in here, always saw the possibilities and always saw the movement and the strategy and the play that nobody else could see. I've been haunted since I've heard of heard about what happened by all the unfinished work and the unfinished connections that are out there. Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for remembering my friend. And thank you for carrying on his work.
Thank you for speaking to us. And I think this will be the last contribution. I'm now going to ask Laura to just say a few final words while I get the music ready.
Yes, I just wanted to say how much David will be missed by his anthropology family at LSE and beyond. And I'm really pleased that his trickster spirit has been mentioned many times during your memories. And that trickster spirit is what we were, loved about David. It was also the thing that made him unique and frustrating at times as well. But it was a spirit that always carried us as a group in entirely new directions. And for me personally, it led me into questioning ideas about debt many, many years ago when I first met him, to being drawn into collaborations with XR. And this always happened in these kind of sudden trickster asides that David would, that was his way of being, a way of engaging with people, meeting him in the corridor, dropping an idea or a thought into our minds, and then just seeing, I guess, what would happen. And that was the trickster in him. So I just want to say how much he'll be missed by all of us. And that although this is the end of our time together for thinking about him as a group that's come together in this virtual way, I'm sure that we will all keep remembering that trickster spirit as we go out into our worlds, and we will kind of manifest it in completely different ways, which is what David would have wanted as well. So thank you all very much for being here. We will also be continuing to commemorate David, probably in more formal ways, through having, in particular, Friday seminar series for him in the next academic year. But I want you all to remember him in your own ways. And thank you so much for joining us here.
Talindia hene, talindia hene, talindia hene, talindia hene, talindia hene, e alla balli pai fama, talindia hene, e alla balli, talindia hene, e alla balli pai fama, talindia hene, e alla balli. Satu buri satu e te regali a kanzu e a cure nere e alla uvali. Satu buri satu te regali a kanzu e a cure nere e alla uvali. Talindia hene e alla balli pai fama, talindia hene e alla balli. Talindia hene e alla balli pai fama, talindia hene.
I've unmuted everyone. If you want to say goodbye, David.
E a cure nere e alla uvali. Lambati saravi, vola mena chiavi, e a cure nere e alla uvali. Talindia here, mukulia bafamboche tutti be. Talindia here, mambatunda tiraya. Talindia here, mukulia bafamboche tutti be. Talindia here, tekange tirene a. Talindia here, talindia here, talindia here, talindia here, talindia here. Talindia hene, talindia hene, hey alla balli pai fama, talindia hene, hey alla balli, talindia hene, hey alla balli pai fama, talindia hene, hey alla balli. Pusi ce ti ama e le fumetti antanga e a cure nere e alla uvali. Fusi ce ti ama le fumetti antanga e a cure nere e alla uvali. Talindia hene e alla balli pai fama, talindia hene e alla balli. Talindia hene e alla balli pai fama, talindia hene e alla balli. Trangu beyananga e amberi vombala e a cure nere e alla uvali. Trangu beyananga amberi vombala e a cure nere e alla uvali. Talindia hene, 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 talindia hene.
Okay, I'm going to end the meeting now for everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.